Rick Fox, a Philadelphia native, was lucky enough to start his career in broadcasting shortly after graduating from the Taylor School of Business. He was hired by WPHL TV's operations manager, George Finkel. A year later, luck was with him again when he was added to the production crew and started his career at Channel 17. He began honing his skills on programs like Wee Willie Weber's Cartoon Club, Delaware Valley Forum, and Phillies Baseball. In 1972, Rick started writing and producing Scream In with the legendary Dr. Shock, who became a fixture at the station. Their friendship together lasted until Dr. Shock's death in 1979. With the help of old footage and associate producer George Cummings, Rick wrote, produced, and hosted the one-hour special, A Tribute to Dr. Shock, which today resides in the Broadcast Pioneers Video Archive. In 1983, while televising Phillies baseball, Rick ran into NBC cameraman Dave Hagan at Veterans Stadium. After a nice talk, Rick decided on nothing more than a whim to send his resume to NBC and ABC. In February 1984, Rick was hired as a cameraman for NBC and the Big Apple. For the next 31 years, Rick televised many famous 30 Rock programs, including Today, Late Night with David Letterman, and Saturday Night Live. He also traveled the world to bring viewers the Game of the Week, 10 Olympics Games, 2 World Series, and 5 Super Bowls. Though he no longer works full-time, Rick continues to freelance for NBC, covering 5 or 6 weeks of golf tournaments, and as a guest cameraman on Late Night with Seth Meyers. All this has led Rick to receiving 16 Emmys. Please welcome Rick Fox into the Broadcast Pioneers Hall of Fame.
Thank you very much to the Broadcast Pioneers for this incredible honor, and especially the nominating committee, including Dory Lenz, Mike Nice, Dave Abramson, and anyone else who pushed the wrong button and was the reason I'm up here tonight. I'm very nervous, as you can probably tell, but not quite as nervous as I was the very first day at Channel 17. I was a 19-year-old kid out of business school, and all through the 60s I was a rock and roll drummer and had some nice success doing that, but I never had a real job. So in June of 1970, George Finkel, the operations manager at Channel 17, hired me as a messenger at $80 a week. And I found myself standing in George's office in June of 1970 as a 19-year-old kid, shaking like a leaf, kind of like I am now. And George said, I'll tell you what, fella, I've got some paperwork to fill out, so do me a favor and turn around and say hello to my secretary, Debbie. I said, okay. So I turned around and I walked across the carpet, and it was a beautiful young lady sitting there at the desk, and I extended my hand and I walked over and I said, hi, I'm Debbie. And she looked up at me and she said, no, I'm Debbie, who are you? So, ladies and gentlemen, I felt my career skyrocket from that moment on. It was all downhill from there. So, over my 12 or 13 years that I worked at Channel 17, I did various jobs. As I said, I was hired as a messenger. I was in the print shop, the film department, I was afforded the opportunity to write, produce, and direct the Dr. Shock shows, whatever they were. It was Scream In to begin with, and then became Mad Theater and Horror Theater. And I ended up as the on-air promotion manager my last 5 years there, which I'll tell you about in a second. It was just an incredible time in my life. I forged friendships and memories that I still hold today with a lot of people like Kathy and Ed Youngman and Dave Abramson, and people that I still hold relationships with 40 and 50 years later. This coming June will begin my 50th year in this crazy business. About 1977, I decided to leave the station for a brief time and pursue one of my passions, which was going into a recording studio. So in the basement of my parents' home, I began a little recording studio. And many of the broadcast pioneers ended up recording there. I had people like Harry Callis, John Facenda, Gene Hart, Jane Norman, Steve Levy, Tom Moran, Sid Doherty, Scott Sanders, Gloria Salmonson. They all recorded at one time or another in my little studio. And aside from the voiceovers, we did a lot of jingles. You may remember Doors Unlimited, Unlimited Doors. You can thank me for that one. That was done in my basement. And although I was having a ball, I had worked at 17 for a while. I had my little recording studio. I was playing the drums at night, having a great time. But it wasn't exactly a cash cow. I wasn't exactly buying my dream home in Maui, based on my residuals. So I was in financial straits. So in April of 1978, sitting home one afternoon, I received a phone call from Frank Gilbuena, who was the on-air promotion manager. And Frank said, listen, I'm going to pursue my passion. I want to leave the station and become a freelance writer. Frank was a brilliant, and still is, a brilliant writer. And he said, I've suggested that you come back to 17 and take my place as the on-air promotion manager. And I said, I jumped at the chance. I said, oh my God, I can't believe I'm coming back. Thank you so much. That phone call changed my entire life. I spoke to Frank the other day. He unfortunately can't be here tonight. He's directing a football game in Syracuse tomorrow and isn't able to be here tonight. But I thanked him and I said, that just turned my whole world around. Had I not returned to Channel 17 in 1978, I never would have met my beautiful wife, Jeannie Linden. We've known each other now for 41 years, and we'll celebrate our 38th anniversary in this coming May. I never would have had our two beautiful kids, Ryan and Christopher, who are both drummers also, by the way. And it changed my whole life. So Frank, publicly, I'd like to thank you very much for that phone call. And also, it afforded me the opportunity to direct the pre- and post-game Phillies shows in the studio with Bob Bradley that year. As the time goes on, people have asked me whether or not I have any humorous stories about the Dr. Shock days. And there's a couple I can tell. The one that kept coming back around in my mind was early on in the Dr. Shock days, around 1972 or 73, up on Mermaid Lane. We used to record the show, I guess, on a Monday afternoon around 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And Dr. Shock had booked the world's smallest horse to appear on the show. Now, we had had many people. We'd had John Carradine was a guest. We had Harry Blackstone Jr., the famous magician, and we had George Goober Lindsay, Lassie. We had a whole array of people over the years. And sure enough, on Monday afternoon, and it was either 72 or 73, I was just starting out my producing of the show. And sure enough, the doors opened and a lady walked in with a rope and a tiny horse, a beautiful, cute little thing, about 24 inches high, the world's smallest horse from the Trenton area. The New Jersey State Fair was in town. And we thought it would be cute to have Bubbles, the mascot of the show, dress up as a cowgirl and bring on the horse and present her with this little miniature horse. So the lady comes in with the horse, and we're talking to Dr. Shock. His real name was Joseph Wislak. And I said, Joe, I think we should bring the horse on, maybe segment 2, segment 3. He said, yeah, okay, no, whatever you want to do, okay, fine. And as I walked over towards the horse, Billy Egbert, he was our crew chief, numero uno cameraman, and my mentor, walked over to me and he said, listen, pal, if that horse does anything on this floor, you are cleaning it up. I said, Eggy, don't worry about it. The horse just came in from outside. It's a small thing. I'm sure it'll be fine. He'll only be here a short time. He said, I'm telling you, pal, if that horse does anything, you are... I said, okay, gotcha. So I walked over to the lady and who owned the horse, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw Ted Bays walk in. Ted Bays was our new station manager. I didn't realize it at the time, but evidently he was not the biggest Dr. Shock fan. Ted came to us from the Midwest, had a tremendous sense of humor, especially a dry sense of humor. And he acknowledged, he looked at the horse, looked at me, I waved to him, he said, okay. And Ted was the one that was responsible for moving Dr. Shock from Saturday nights to Saturday afternoon. So Dr. Shock used to be the horror host, screaming and with the flashing lights and so forth. Well, now he put him on Saturday afternoon, so it was more of a rubber chicken and a hit over the head with a hammer and a pie in the face, and changed the whole format of the show. So I go over to the lady and I say, okay, listen, I think we're going to put the horse on, maybe segment 2, and all of a sudden, everybody in the studio started gasping and laughing. And I looked down, and sure enough, the horse was beginning to do what horses do best on the studio floor. And I looked over at Billy Egbert, and he went, you? Yeah, I said, oh, geez, oh, my God. I looked around, and I'm looking for a dustpan, a cue card, anything, a newspaper, something to put under. Nothing available. All I had in my hand was a legal pad with that day's script. And out of sheer desperation, I ran over and I put the script under the rear end of the horse, just in time for the horse to do what horses do best, all over that day's script. I stood up and looked at Eggy, and he said, great, nice job. I said, thanks. And I looked over at Ted Bays, our station manager, and Ted said, how appropriate. And he turned and he walked away. So that's my Dr. Shock story. Anyway, it was a fabulous time. I did want to mention very quickly, one last thing was this past Monday night, I was very saddened by the hearing about the passing of Gene Arnold. Back in the early 70s, 71, 72, 73, Gene Arnold was on the Dr. Shock show many, many times. About 4 or 5, 6 years ago, whatever it was, Dave Abramson, my buddy, had invited Jeannie and myself to attend one of these dinners. It was my first time here. And I was astounded by the amount of talent in broadcast history sitting in this room. So on the way out after the dinner, I was going through the lobby, retrieving the coat and the car and so forth, and I saw Gene Arnold in a wheelchair. And I said to Dave, oh my God, I know him, that's Gene Arnold. He goes, yeah. I said, what happened? He said, well, a car accident and the poor guy's going through some cancer issues and so forth. I said, Dave, I worked with him 45 years ago. I'd love to say hello. Dave said, go ahead. So I started to walk over, and I'm looking at him and thinking, boy, this is unbelievable. I haven't seen this guy for 45 years. And just before I got to Gene, about 6 or 8 people surrounded him, shaking hands. Hi, Gene, how are you? Good to see you. So I backed off. I chickened out. I backed off. I went over to Dave, and I said, you know what? Chances are he will never remember who I am, because it was 45 years ago. And I said, maybe some other time I'll meet up with Gene and say hello again. Dave said, okay, whatever. So I went home that night, and for the last 5 or 6 years, I always regretted never saying hello to Gene. I never did see him again. 2 months ago in September, I was in the backyard doing some yard work. Happened to look at my phone, and I had a voicemail, and it was from a number that I didn't recognize. And I played the voicemail, and in a very strained voice, a gentleman said, Rick, this is Gene Arnold. I don't think or know you'll remember me, but I just wanted to touch base with you and tell you how much I enjoyed and loved doing the Dr. Shock shows in 1971, 72, 73. I know who you are. I had the best time of my life. So I stopped the voicemail, and I called the number immediately, and Gene answered. And I said, Gene, I can't believe you're calling me back. I have idolized you, first of all, as a musician. I know he was a DJ, and I listened to him many times. But to have worked with him in the early 70s, 45, almost 50 years ago, I was absolutely blown away by this conversation. He said, "Rick, I had the best time of my life doing those Dr. Shock shows. Remember the time Dr. Shock shaved off half my mustache? Do you remember the time he put the pie in my face or hit me with the rubber chicken?" I said, "Gene, they were magic. It was terrific. It was a lot of fun. We all had a lot of fun doing those shows." We spoke at least 20 minutes, maybe a little bit more, and it was very tough for him to speak. And at the end of the conversation, I asked Gene, I said, "Will you be able to attend tonight's dinner?" And he said, "Rick, I can hardly get off the sofa. I won't be there this year, but do me a favor and please say hello to everybody for me." And so on behalf of Gene Arnold, hello from Gene. The last thing I wanted to mention was, I know there's a lot of young folks in the room tonight. There is so much history sitting in this room. It's staggering. If you are a young person and you want to go into this business and you've been inspired to go into this business, if you see someone tonight in this room that you've seen on television who you admire, if you see a radio personality who you admire and maybe has inspired you to go into this crazy business, go up to them tonight, please. Don't wait for 4 or 5 years for that phone call, because it may not come. Thank you very much to the Broadcast Pioneers. And I figure it's not too shabby, not too bad from a kid from Havertown who at one time in his career thought his name was Debbie. Thank you very much.